Hello and welcome back. So, are you ready for the next part, which is the anatomy of your chart? The first thing I'm going to do is download the PDF of the chart that you get from my website and just talk you through that a little bit. And then I will move on to showing you all of the different parts of the actual body graph. So first off, if you went to my website, you will have on the screen itself the body chart. So this part here is referred to as the body chart. And then on the website, all of this information down the side here would have appeared underneath. You can scroll up and down. Now, if you download the PDF, this is how it comes out. Now, unfortunately, I have no control over how this PDF comes out, and it's a great source of irritation for me that there's this blank pages. However, when I saw someone in person, they had printed it out landscape, and then they'd stapled it together, and actually it kind of made a little A5 book. They'd folded it in half, and then here there actually was, as they said, space for notes. So we're looking at it in a positive way. But when you first download the chart, have a little read through each of these descriptions. So it's basically one of the main things to start with is familiarizing yourself with the words that are used often by people when talking about human design, because as well as looking at all the squares and the triangles and the lines and the numbers and the shapes, people will sort of say, oh, what's your type, what's your strategy, like what's your authority, what are all these different things? And you can be like, what? I don't know what you're talking about. So all of the words down the side here of these little descriptions, your profile, your incarnation cross, your signature. The further you go down is actually the less you'll probably hear people talk about it. The main stuff you'll hear people talk about is the stuff at the top. Now you'll also see that I have removed my birth date, and birthplace, design date from here, because just a little sort of human design housekeeping tip, awareness thing. You will see in a lot of human design groups, if you are kind of looking for information and showing different people, say, oh, post your chart, post your chart. Now, because the reason you get your chart is based on where all of the planets and everything were at your time of birth, it puts your time of birth on the chart as a confirmation to you almost that you've got the right chart and you've put in the right information. But if you are sharing it with others, just be mindful if you want other people to know your birthday or not and where you were born, because sometimes, I don't know how true this is, but in the past it might have been a security question, you know, where were you born, and that's one of your security questions. So just be mindful if sharing your chart data with others, whether or not, I mean, some people, you have your birthday, you might have your birthday on your Facebook page, so people know anyway. But yeah, just be mindful. I've taken it off here as a reminder for me to remind you, for kind of chart safety, little safety tips in human design. If you don't want people to have your full details, then just like remove it, blank it out, cross it through, or don't share it online. It's up to you, obviously. So like I said, the things to get used to are your type. You'll be given a type. So my chart, when you download my chart, I give you a little mini description to get you started, to go with it. So this little page is all very neat and tidy if I don't give you the description. It's actually the description I give you that's messed up the page. So if it just had type, manifesting generator, strategy to respond, authority, emotional in a nice little line, it would all fit on one page. So have a little read and just go through these things. So the introduction to type, your strategy and your authority, and the rest of the chart are actually the things that you'll find later on in the guides. There's going to be separate little trainings, little tutorials to talk you through those in more detail. But to start with, just read the little descriptions on here and get used to the language that is on your chart. So for me, my type manifesting generator, my strategy to respond, my authority, emotional. If you just start to learn those words, the main words there, my profile, 2, 4, definition, split definition. Don't worry so much about the incarnation cross, signature, satisfaction. Then as you start to familiarize and learn those words that are in your chart, whenever you're looking into your chart, you're going to be, oh yeah, okay, that's me. I've got the 2-fold profile. Oh yeah, that's me. My strategy was to respond. Oh yeah, that's me. I've got the emotional authority. So just start to familiarize yourself with those words. That's like a really good starting place. So now what I'm going to do is take you on to actually explain what these all these number squares and everything mean and how it can help you. Okay, so the anatomy of the actual body graph itself. Now, what I've done here for you is you will see that I have deliberately used 2 different types of graphics to help just to help explain things. So human design, the body graph itself, the colors don't matter. That's something that I get asked all the time. It's like, well, does it matter this one's red or this one's black or this one's... The colors are used to differentiate between the different parts, and everybody who is a human design reader will probably use their brand colors. So when I initially first started doing human design, I got all of my charts from a site called Genetic Matrix. Anyone can use Genetic Matrix. You can do an element of it for free. And if you want to dive deep into it, I think it's like $8 or $9 for the day, and you can have it. But this is how they do their charts. So they have black down one side, red down the other, and then they use different colors for all the centers. Whereas my brand colors, I've got a dark purple, a light color purple, and I don't actually use different colors for the centers. But the reality is, no matter what chart you get, the colors don't. The colors mean something in terms of whether it is black, whether it is red, whether it is dark purple, whether it is light purple, but it doesn't matter whether it's purple or black or red or light purple. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. But once you understand the anatomy of your chart, even if you're looking, so if you're researching yourself and you go off and start to dive into other things, you might see a chart and it's all different colors, but it won't matter. You'll understand what it means. So just as a little reminder from the kind of what is human design thing, for me, human design is the external permission to stop questioning things you already knew about yourself to be true. And it is a roadmap to help get you back to who you were designed to be. And if you haven't got your chart yet, or you skip that section somehow, you can go to my website, Piece of Cake Coaching, and get the chart. So what have we got here? So we have got the body graph. We've got arrows around the top, and we have these 2 columns of numbers down each side. So depending on how familiar you are with astrology, you may recognize these symbols as the planets. So we've got the sun, the earth, we've got the north node, the south node, the moon, and Mercury, and they go all the way down. You've got Pluto here, and then at the bottom, I think that is Chiron. I can't remember off the top of my head. But those symbols are the usual astrological symbols that you might be used to seeing. Or if you can't remember what they are, or you want to start looking this up further, then you can just look up like astrological symbols for planets and it will give you the names of them. Okay, so they're the same on both sides, but they are different colors. Oh. So the reason they're different colors is to do with whether or not you recognize something in your chart, whether you're conscious of it or not. Now, if you watch the video where I talked about my 2-4 profile, the 2 you can see here. So I've got that kind of written here, the gates and the lines. But the 2 here is where the 2 in my profile comes from. And the 4 here is where the 4 in my profile comes from. So whenever you are looking, and if you're 5'1" or you're a 6'3", it's because of the little number after the dot here. That is how you get your profile. And when I explained about, like, I am conscious of my 2, my little hermit, very conscious of my 2, I'm not so conscious of my 4. I feel more like a lonely person than I do a peoply person. So all of the things, if you go on this human design journey and you're sort of uncovering things, anything down this side, whether you are aware of it or not, will also depend on just potentially how much other personal development work you've done. And it may be that you are already aware of things because you've already been on various journeys of self-discovery or whatever else you may have happened to have done already in your life so far. So in terms of these numbers inside, so you've got the planets, like I said, you've got the sun and the earth, and then the numbers that are next to it are the same numbers as are inside these boxes and shapes, and they are referred to as the gates. Okay. So you'll hear people talk about the gates a lot. So, you know, I've got gate 9, it means this, this, this. Or you might hear people say, oh, gate so-and-so is activated this week. So the gates have 2 lenses at which we look at them through. So when you are looking at information or you're researching your chart or you're thinking about things, whether a gate is in a certain center, which I am coming on to in a minute, or whether you're looking at it through the lens of the planet, it will have a slightly different meaning. Okay. So, for example, the voices, so this is the throat center here. So this square here that I've got colored in and defined is the throat. And the gates are all the little numbers inside of the box. Now, on this chart, my chart, if the gate is colored in, then that means that I have that gate activated in my chart. So the gates that are the dark purple come from this side. So the 62 comes here from my moon. And then we've got the 16 here, which comes from my earth. Okay. Now, if we take the 16 as an example, the earth, so all of these planets have meanings. Now, this is not something that actually you need to know right away, but it's something that if you continue your human design journey, all of the planets have a role to play. And especially in business or marketing, actually, that's kind of the route you do go down, is you start looking at what gates you have in what planets, and that can help you a lot with your business. But the earth is the energy of what grounds you. Okay. So when I'm looking at gate 16 through the lens of the earth and what grounds me, I'm going to be looking at it in a different way to if I'm looking at gate 16, which is the same gate, is where it comes from. It's in my chart, but through the lens of what it's doing in the center of my throat. Okay. So gate 16 is all about mastery. It's all about, so you'll find gates have different names. So it's like the gate of enthusiasm is 16, but because I'm enthusiastic about something, I will then delve into it and I will master the thing. Because I'm excited about something, I want to know more about it. And so in terms of my sort of earth, it's around the mastering of my subject is going to ground me. So learning more about something is kind of what grounds me. But in terms of the voice and the voice that I use with the gate 16, it's more the enthusiasm side of it. So I'm telling you the things I've mastered because I'm excited about it. So that's why it's this gate here in this throat, this 16, is why I talk about human design, because I'm excited about it. I'm excited about it. So I go and learn all about it and I tell you all about it. So that's kind of gate 16. But the gate energy itself is like the same, but how it is presented and how you use it and how you learn to harness that energy will be different as to whether you're looking at it through a planet or you're looking at it through a center. That makes sense. Hopefully that makes sense. So things to know, like I said, so you've got gates, which are all the numbers inside of the centers. So the centers are all of these different boxes. Now, you will be needing to learn and to know and to recognize whether things are defined, undefined, or open, which I have another slide on that to go into more detail. You will hear people refer to channels. So the channel is when two gates are connected, okay? So the thing that confused me initially when I first started looking at my chart is the channels are almost like all drawn on to the chart. So you can see here, you can see the lines between all these different, the 59 and the 55 and the 39. So technically the line is there. It's not colored in. So that means none of that part of my chart is activated. It's not activated. Whereas when I have both gates at either end of that line activated and switched on, so they're coloured in, that's what creates a channel. And actually, it's that channel that decides whether something is defined. Okay, so can you see up here? The defined centers are the ones that are coloured in, and the undefined centers are the ones that are white or not coloured in. So all of these defined centers are coloured in and they're defined because if you trace it back, there are channels, i.e. two gates connected between all of them, okay? Now here, in my undefined centers at the top, I have a gate activated, but the corresponding gate on the other side is not activated. So therefore there isn't a channel. So therefore that's what makes it undefined. Now there is also open, which I will explain further on. But the main thing to get your head round when looking at your chart is these are the planets down the side. The numbers here are the gates, and they are the same numbers which are inside the centers. So all of these triangles, squares, etc. are centers. The lines that join them up are the channels. And whether or not a channel is actually activated in your chart is if the gates are either end of the channel. So you actually only have a channel if the gates are activated. Okay. Now the lines are the little dots after your gates. So again, the lines are probably like a much more advanced part of the chart that you wouldn't look at this stage, but it is the line that does make up your profile. Like I said, I'm a 2, 4. I'm a 2, 4. So it's kind of like that's what they're, if you hear people talk about lines, that's all of the numbers after the decimal places on the planets. Okay. So the variables are all to do with the arrows around the top of your head. And everyone always asks, what are all these numbers? What are all these numbers? So the numbers, they all mean something. So on the other chart that we started with, where it had the bottom, like what your digestion is and what your design sense is, it's those numbers that give you that answer. But instead of you having to learn what all the numbers mean here, instead the return on that PDF chart that you downloaded, it just says digestion, mine says indirect. So you don't really need to know what those numbers are. The thing to pay attention to is which direction these arrows are pointing, because there will be part of the information I give you will be asking you to look at which direction these arrows are pointing. Okay. So we talked about the centers, which are these all these different shapes here, and they all have names. So you will hear people talk a lot around you'll say most people say the head. Sometimes it will be called the crown. You will hear people say ajna, which is this one here, which is also sometimes called the mind. You have the throat. You have this little triangle here, which has 3 different names, which can be confusing: the ego, the will, or the heart, and people interchange those 3. So they're all the same one. You have this one here, which is the emotional solar plexus, which some people abbreviate as ESP. You have the sacral, which is this big box in the middle. You have the root, which is at the bottom. You have the spleen, and you have this one here, which some people call the G center, some people call the identity center. So the main thing to start to learn is the names of these different shapes, so that when people are talking about, you'll hear people just say, oh, the throat center, oh, the G center, oh, your spleen, oh, your sacral. Is starting to learn and know which box, which shape that is, but also is it colored in or not? Okay, so here you can see I have all of these colored in and I have these 2 not. So that's the thing that I also have to learn. So I've learned the names of them, but I've also learned whether they're colored in or not. Okay, now I put some extra information here. So if you want to pause this and kind of have a little read, this is like the next level, but it does explain stuff later on. And when I'm explaining things in some of the further videos, I will reference this. So some of the centers, that they all have their own kind of unique role, and some of them create pressure. Some of them are motor centers, so it's where we get our energy from. So there's 4 motor centers: the ego, the emotional solar plexus, the sacral, and the root. The root and the head are pressure centers, so they create pressure. The spleen is an awareness center. The emotions, it's awareness. So, you sort of get awareness from your emotions. You get awareness from your intuition from the spleen. The G center is all around your kind of direction, so it helps direct you into which way you want to go and what you want. Same with the ego. So these are things that, if you want to kind of maybe go that next step further, is also trying to remember. You don't have to remember, but especially like which ones are the pressure centers and which ones are the motor centers. The throat center, obviously, is quite obvious. We can kind of understand that one quite easily. How we express ourselves is going to come out through the throat, because like I said at the beginning, around which gates are in which of the centers is kind of what their role is. Okay, so the gates in the throat are all to do with your expression, and the gates in your emotional solar plexus, because it's your emotional center, are going to all to do with how you're feeling and your emotions. So if you just start to look at, I know, gate 37 and start reading about it, but you haven't kind of realized that's actually in your emotional center, the 2 are connected. It has like the energy from the center is also relevant to the gate, as well as what planet it's in. Okay, so that's something. So you can, like I say, stop this, have a little look, have a little read. I'll repeat myself many times throughout these videos, because it does take us a lot of little bits and bobs to learn and go in. So why did I say or ask you to pay attention to whether your centers are coloured in or not? So as well as learning what their names are, is working out whether they're coloured in or not. Now, the reason for that is when you're starting to look at the impact your human design is going to have on you, and how you implement it and how you use it and what you learn from it. If you have a defined center, which is colored, it means you have consistent access to the energy of that center. So whatever you read, whatever you discover, whatever you kind of look at, that is going to be energy that comes from you, from within you, and it's going to more than likely be consistent. Okay. Now, if you have an undefined center, which is the white ones, then that means that's where you take on the energy of others. So it's less consistent for you because the energy isn't being generated by you internally. The energy is something that's like an input. The defined centers is like you sort of generating an output, and the undefined centers is what you take on. So it's almost like an input. And obviously you are less in control of an input than you are of something that you generate yourself. And so again, when we're looking at things in the chart, if we're looking at gates, or we're looking at the effect the gates in certain centers have on us, if they're in a defined center, it means that they're consistently going to be there. They're consistently playing a role. They're playing a role. If we have gates that are in the undefined centers, it means they're not always going to be switched on in the same way. The energy of those gates will come and go as we need them. Like we'll tap into them when we need them, and they'll sort of come and go, and they're not as consistent part of our own energy. Okay, so whenever people are talking about the throat or the head or the thing, it's really important to know, okay, is this a center where I generate my own energy, or is this a center where I take on the energy of others? And then the third one that I mentioned, which is the open. Okay. Now, the open is, I don't have any open centers on my chart. But here, you see where I've got like one gate activated here and one gate activated there. If in my head center there were no gates activated at all, that would be what open is. Now, some humans I got confused when I first started learning it, because people sort of use this term undefined and open interchangeably when actually they mean different things. So undefined means you have at least one like gate activated in that center, but you don't have your own energy. Whereas open means there's no gates activated in that center. And where that is important, if depending on how deeply you go into this, is where you have something activated. Like I said, that's your own energy. So almost in these two undefined centers, those two gates are my anchor point. They are always going to be my energy. They may come and go, but if you have no gates at all, you don't have any anchor points to your own energy. So if you have a completely open center, you're likely to the effect of everything you take in might be even more heightened because there is no anchor point of your own energy at all. So that's why we talk about understanding the defined, the undefined, and the open, so that when you are listening to me talking about what's in the chart, it's all going to be to do with what you have consistent access to that you're generating yourself versus the energy that you're going to be taking in from others. Now, there is no good, there is no bad, there is no one is better than the other. They all have strengths and weaknesses. Okay, same as everything does. It's always the yin, the yang. They all have strengths and weaknesses, but really starting to know what yours are and harnessing those, and then looking for support when you need it. So, for example, I have the undefined head and ajna, which means that my head, my mind is open to external noise. Like the input is coming in. Okay. So it gets very noisy in my head. And the noise and the input that's coming in is going to try and overwrite my own energy. Okay, so my own energy, for me, the way my chart is designed is very split. There's undefined in my head and ajna. The rest of my body is my own energy. It's defined. But what will happen is my mind will try and talk me out of all the noise and the chatter that's coming in from outside, will try and talk me out of my intuition and my sacral response and my emotional response. And the external noise will try and interfere. So I've learned that and I know that. Now, there is a gift in it, which I'm not going to go into now. But in terms of this, I'm very aware. So it's almost like I can feel myself and I sort of almost like shut out the noise. I'm like, hang on, this is not my noise. This is not mine. I don't need to be thinking about this. This is not relevant. I don't need to be thinking about this. And I go back into my body. So where we've got to so far, just to recap, is learning the things that you are aware of, which when you first read them and discover them, you might resonate more with. The unconscious, you may think, oh, I don't know about that. Then thinking about the names of the different centers so that when people start to talk about it, you know where it is, and paying attention to whether it is defined or undefined. So it's your own energy or where you take on the energy of others. Now, the channels and the gates and things, they are important. So do pay attention to it, but you might not need to know, you need to know kind of what they are, but it's not a big deal. At this stage is like learning all the different little bits of gates and what all the different channels are, but it's important to know roughly what they are. You can ignore these little numbers here for now, but just pay attention to which direction your arrows are going, and they're called the variables because I will mention that at a later date. So if you have any questions or any of that doesn't make sense, then let me know. But that's a really quick, might not have felt quick, as quick as I could do, anatomy of your chart to get you started. Okay, so now the reminder and the caveat that, so I didn't actually write this on there, but I did mention it. There is no good, there is no bad. It just shows you how to harness your own energy and the things that are you have consistent access to, and the things that are your gifts. But when we have to look at human design in a linear way, okay, we just have to. We have to start somewhere. And like I started with the planets, then I started with the centers, then I like we have to learn it in a linear way. But the reality is your chart is the sum of all the parts. And so the danger can be when you very first start looking into your human design is you'll look at one part, but then actually how it combines with another part of your chart gets you a slightly different answer. So it is, just be aware that it's your chart as a whole that is the big picture, and all these little bits are the sum of the parts. And an analogy I use, which I'm not sure if it's the best analogy, but it's the best one I could come up with, was when you are making a cake or something, let's say you've got some butter, flour, sugar, eggs, milk, and you've got them all on the worktop. Individually, they all have a role, they all have a part. You've got some flour, you've got some butter, you've got some eggs. You know what they all do, you know what their role is. But depending on how you then combine them together, you might get a cake, you might get Yorkshire puddings, you might get pancakes. It's going to get you a different result. So that's kind of the analogy that I came up with to kind of help you see that when looking at your chart, It's being open-minded and kind of learning it, but layering it all on top, because we have to do it in a linear process, but it all adds up together to get you your answer. Um, so in this particular group, there are no Q&As or chats and things, but there is a monthly business lounge over in the Missing Piece. So if you're not already in there, you can pop over to the Missing Piece, which is my original group that I've had for 3 years, and there is a monthly business lounge. You go out to the events, and so if you have any questions where you actually want to talk, you know, in person rather than commenting, then do feel free, come and join me over in the Missing Piece on the monthly business lounge. And then you can ask any questions if you're not quite sure. So hopefully that's given you somewhere to get started with, just in terms of, so at this point, we're not really understanding what any of it means. We're understanding all the language that I'm going to be using in the rest of all the videos, because if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's not going to make sense when I actually start helping you to interpret what all these things mean. So this part has been really about helping you to get to grips with the language that I'm going to be using in all of the other videos. But I hope that makes sense. If you have any questions, do ask, and I will see you all soon.